PolyTheism is a podcast at the intersection of sexuality, identity, relationships, and spirituality. If you're seeking a deeper spiritual connection in these areas of your life, we're hoping to be companions on your journey.
Whether you've been hurt by religion and are looking for healing, identify with a faith tradition and are looking outside of the box, identify as spiritual but not religious and want more, or are looking for meaning beyond what is in your life, we believe we can do this together.
Through love, curiosity, and wonder. My name is Justin Almeida. I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister, hospital chaplain, and sometimes spiritual director. I'm mestizo, queer, and polyamorous, and I reside on the unceded land of the Duwamish and Coast Salish people. I have a Master of Divinity with a specialization in chaplaincy, and identify as a spiritual humanist.
And my name is Sandra Elliott. I'm a kinky, poly, switchy, demisexual goth who makes a living putting together training programs. I consider myself white, queer, and nerdy. I have a master's in rhetoric and writing with a specialization in adult learning and consider myself spiritual but not religious. And today, what are we talking about?
We are talking about healing sexual, spiritual wounds. So, really kind of light topic.
Yeah, light topic. Yeah, super duper light. Okay, let's just pause and say, what do you mean by sexual, spiritual wounds?
In my work as a hospital chaplain and as a spiritual director, I often encounter people who, through their lives, have been spiritually abused, or because of their prior or current spiritual traditions, have encountered pain and wounding because many times religion has very specific beliefs about gender and sexuality, about the body, and sometimes often when people and their identities and their bodies and their sexualities go against what they were raised with religiously and spiritually, this can cause a lot of psychospiritual pain and trauma. And so when I talk about psychospiritual wounds or sexual spiritual wounds, that's what I'm talking about. How about you? How do you look at it?
I have to say, to start with, that the concept of spiritual abuse was something that I had never heard until I heard it from a counselor in 2012. Going to counseling and getting help for myself, somebody brought up the concept of spiritual abuse, and I was just stunned. I was like, what do you mean? My therapist outlined the fact that in the spiritual realms, whether it's through church or whether it's through caregivers or anything along those lines, people can put expectations upon you and demands upon you that you can't meet or don't want to meet or anything along those lines. It's a lot of different things there that were combined. And for me, it meant I'm not a traditional woman, and that I was not looking to get married and have kids and be a homemaker or anything along those lines. I wasn't tremendously girly to begin with. Not only that, but I was a weird kid in a small town that liked scary stuff. I liked horror movies. The music that I liked was not supposedly acceptable. All of this other kind of stuff led to me feeling so much like an outsider and so much like everything about me was wrong that I spent the first 20 years of my adult life just feeling like I was never going to fit in. And as a matter of fact, I still struggle with this. That. I still always very much feel like an outsider. Somehow I just am not like other human beings. And a lot of that comes from spiritual wounding. Yeah. I was surprised to find that was a thing. And as I talk to other people, I find that they struggle with it as well.
And spiritual wounds, even outside of gender and sexuality, often, and sometimes we refer to them as moral injury. It is this idea that we are raised in a culture with certain beliefs and traditions that tell us who a good person is. What does it mean to be a good human being? What does it mean to be a contributing member of society and all of these things? And when human beings are placed into situations that are counter to those narratives, it's very hard to reconcile that. I think a good example is when I worked at the Veterans Administration in Puget Sound. Often these young kids, and I say young kids, they're adults, but they're, in their early 20s or mid 20s who have been in active combat. In our culture, for kids, for their whole lives, we tell young people, be kind to one another. Don't kill people. share, all of these things, and that then we place them into a situation in which then we tell them, no, except for these people. You get to kill these people. You get to, this is how you become a man or how you become a soldier. And it goes against all of the things that they were taught maybe as children. And that wounding, and especially if the person has killed somebody, can sometimes create incredibly difficult wounds psychologically and spiritually that can take a lifetime to heal. When we put the sexual dimension on top of that, it's heavy.
Yeah, something that I think is really interesting is that you use the term moral injury. That's something that you used with me recently when we were talking about corporate culture.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things that I was being asked to do or that I was being told to do were very much counter to what I considered to be appropriate or acceptable. And you asked me about whether or not I felt like that was causing me moral injury. And again, that's a term. I'm stunned that these are terms that I've never heard.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it wasn't something that occurred to me. You know what? You're right. This is moral injury. I'm being asked to do things that I don't consider ethical, that I don't consider acceptable, that in some ways I've kind of got to set myself aside to do. And there are places in your life where that's appropriate. If you have to care for somebody when really you are far too tired for it, but it is your responsibility, that kind of thing. Or when you have to step up and defend someone when usually you are the type of person that is, I don't say or do things like that. But yeah, there are times when that becomes part of your identity, like when you are a soldier or when you are a Christian or when you are a Buddhist or whatever it is that you happen to be, and somebody says, no, you're doing it wrong, or it goes against everything that you've been learning before about what it means to be human. It's devastating. It can be really devastating.
Yeah, and those wounds can take sometimes a lifetime to heal, especially if they are rooted in one's childhood.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically when it comes to spiritual wounds and sexual spiritual wounds, a lot of these beliefs are developed very, very early. When we're 2, 3, 4 years old. When I was growing up, a lot of it was boys don't wear pink, or boys don't play with dolls, or don't touch yourself. That's wrong. Don't masturbate. It's a sin, right? And even the concept of sin and the body, you put all of these together, and really what it comes out to are people feeling wounded and disconnected from their existential and ontological truth.
Or to put it more basically, but disconnected from their bodies, disconnected from their hearts, disconnected from their minds and their understandings of who they are.
Yeah.
Because it's not allowed to be that way.
Yeah. Within the contract, whether it's a religious contract or a social contract. One thing that I've learned, especially as a spiritual humanist, all these beliefs about what it means to be human, what it means to be good, all of these are all social contracts that I make with myself, that I make with my community, that I make with my family. They're created.
Yeah, they're not inherent to being human.
Yeah. Now, religious traditions, a lot of them do teach that these are things that we are created with or created for. Growing up Catholic and growing up Christian, there was this idea that God created human beings for a specific purpose and with specific goals, such as men and women were created to have sex together for children. That is something that not all Christians, but many Christian denominations still believe.
And let's just talk about for a minute, how that can impact people. If you are someone who, when you grow up, you cannot have children for whatever reason, you cannot conceive, or you cannot help your partner conceive, or you don't find a partner, or, anything along those lines, it can really have a deep impact on you feeling like you are somehow not doing what you're supposed to be doing as a human being.
Or you're being punished.
Yeah, you're being punished. Ooh, that's a tough one. Yeah.
And that can happen too in many different religious traditions. Shame is imposed on the people who don't fit the narrative. It's either like, oh, well, you must have done something that you deserve to be punished. Or I think one of the worst things I can hear in the hospital is, God doesn't give you more than you can handle, and maybe God's just trying to make you stronger.
Ugh, yeah, I kind of want to like slap people when they say that, you know?
And really what that does is that puts the onus of a person to think that, well, then all of a sudden this all-powerful deity has it out for me?
Yeah. What
Yeah.
are they trying to hone me into? That comes back to that concept of who you are, that fundamental isness of you is what is it that God is trying to bring out in me if they're creating this much pain and suffering? That can be incredibly damaging. And when we're talking about sexual spiritual wounds, we're not just talking about sex in the way of having sex or procreation or any kind of sexual action. We're also talking about gender and, gender positioning in culture. One of the biggest sexual spiritual wounds I have is that I was a girl and now a woman who questioned everything. I asked questions all the time. I was the kind of person who wanted to understand everything as deeply as I possibly could. And there were so many places that basically said, look, that is not your role as a woman. As a woman, you are to follow. You are to listen and to follow. And so I come to a lot of situations where if I'm sharing what I think, or if I'm sharing what I feel, or if I'm asking questions, or if I'm challenging, I worry that I'm too much.
Yeah.
Because I'm not taking a passive role.
Yeah.
And men get this too, right? Men are supposed to be the protectors, and they're supposed to be the providers, and they're supposed to be the strong ones, and all of that. And men are not allowed to have emotional intimacy except with their sexual partner, which is problematic as hell.
I mean, one's own identity isn't allowed to go beyond the container.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've learned about humanity at the bedside and all these different places and positions is that we grow and we change, we learn. Through my life, I have moved from identifying as cishet and monogamous and identifying strongly as male, and now as I've become older, I've really become aware that this was an identity that I was trying to live into because I thought it's what made me good.
Yeah, and just think about what that does to people who don't fit on the gender dynamic that our spiritual cultures teach us. If you feel like I am a man, but everybody sees me as a woman, or I don't feel like I'm a man or a woman, or any of those things. Imagine the damage that does to them. And also people who come in any way as being queer or in any way as being kinky. All of that stuff is seen as evil and wrong.
And regardless if somebody belongs to one of these religious or spiritual traditions, because these are also entwined with culture, people can be sexually, spiritually wounded, even if they're not a believer.
Mm-hmm.
I think of young people, even if they're raised spiritual or not religious or atheist or agnostic, and yet they go to school, they live in the world, and yet encounter these narratives telling them that they are evil, that they're wrong. When we go to Pride, there's always these people who hang out outside of the Pride event with these signs that say fags are going to hell and all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And for young people to be surrounded and encompassed by a culture that is telling them that who they are at their core identity is wrong, that's one of the reasons why suicide rates are so high.
It damages them so badly. I just wanted to point to one example as we're talking about our own experiences. Gosh, back in my early 30s, I went to a seminar by a speaker who in it was talking about, I was thinking about starting my own business, and this might actually be one of the reasons it took me so long to start my own business. Basically, this guy made it abundantly clear that to have a business, you had to have all of the traditionally male behaviors, right? You had to be aggressive. You had to be like this way. You had to beat the competition. You had to think about it as a war. You had to do this. And that is never what I wanted. Everything that I want to do is collaborative. And so I just thought there's no hope for me. I can't do this because I don't have the right way of looking at it. So it doesn't have to be a spiritual wound. It doesn't have to be a spiritual environment. I was looking to this person to motivate and help me, and they hurt me instead.
I mean, this is just a business coach,
Yeah.
right? This is just somebody who is like, I'm successful in business, and so you need to do it this way. What happens when those people are our teachers,
Yeah.
our parents,
Mm-hmm.
our grandparents, our loved ones, our friends?
Mm-hmm.
All of these things.
Our therapists.
Yeah, our therapists,
Mm-hmm.
our medical providers.
Mm-hmm.
For so long, being queer in the DSM was considered a psychological disorder.
Yeah, that's like decades.
Right?
It's decades old, and now Meta is like, it's totally fine to
Yeah.
call it a mental illness. By the way, fuck you, Mark Zuckerberg, for that.
And we're still working on this today. And this is why, especially on polytheism, we want to talk about what does it mean to heal sexual spiritual wounds? Because we go through life, every human being is going to encounter hurt and wounding.
Mm-hmm.
Whether I fall down and scuff my knee or get into a car crash, I look at my son and how many times that he has either fallen down and hurt himself or has cried because I had a really hard day at work and my temper was short and so I snapped at him. Being human doesn't mean not encountering trauma. And trauma defined as anything that causes change or brokenness.
Yeah,
and
harm.
Brokenness and harm. And so as human beings, what I hope we are doing and what spirituality and culture and connection can do at its best is help us move through trauma toward healing.
I don't know any way to really talk about that except to start off by talking. This is the way my brain works. I always think kind of bottom up. I think about examples, and from those examples, I extrapolate the more generic. So I think it's a good way to approach this topic is to talk about our own experiences, what we're willing to share about the spiritual wounds that we had and how we started healing them.
Yeah.
You brought up the fact that you really tried for a long time to be cis, het, monogamous. How did you start to heal from that? How did you start to realize that that was just a role, a creation, and it didn't necessarily match you?
For me, my path to healing really started with realizing that nobody gets to tell me about me except for me. I mean, really, that was the beginning.
How did you get there? Because that's a big thing.
Well, it took going to seminary, believe it or not. It's a widely known truth that seminary will either completely shatter your faith or harden it. And for me, it broke me wide open.
Yeah.
Right? It shattered my box of religion and allowed me to then move into what does it mean to be spiritual. And for me, when that box was broken, I was left with all these questions of, well, if I don't believe this anymore, then what do I believe? If I don't no longer believe that Jesus was the Son of God, fully human and fully divine, everything that you find in a lot of the Christian creeds, then what do I believe? What do I believe about who I am as a human being? How I was made? Do I still believe in God? And so from that beginning and taking classes in psychology and in spirituality, by going to therapy, by encountering diverse groups and individuals with different thoughts and opinions, I began to form a foundation of nobody gets to tell me about me except me. At my core, my ontological and existential being. And from there, I'm able to look at the hurt and the trauma and the wounds and see them as what they are, which is just beliefs from other people who thought in many ways that they were doing the right thing and that I don't have to believe them anymore.
You make that journey sound gentle.
Well,
it wasn't, I know.
Story. No, it's not. It's not gentle. I mean, it's blood, sweat, and tears.
Uh-huh.
Because these are wounds, and wounds bleed.
Mm-hmm.
Whether they're physical, psychological, or spiritual.
Often they can be all three. Even if you don't have a physical scar from things, The stress, the damage that is done by you trying to fit yourself into a mold that doesn't fit you creates all kinds of damage in your body. We are not meant to live like that, and that damages our bodies.
There's this really great book, The Body Keeps the Score, and it follows research on our psychological, spiritual, and physical existence. And really what it shows is that when I am psychologically wounded or spiritually wounded or physically wounded, these impact the other parts.
Yeah, there's a philosophical term for that.
Well, in medicine, we call it care for the whole self. And so when I encounter a wound, I wonder, by saying encountering a wound, what I mean is when I experience a pain, whether it's physically, psychologically, or spiritually, what I'm trying to ask myself is, well, where is this coming from? And a good example of this is that often I will have patients in the hospital who they come in for, let's say they have an aneurysm. And they come in, they get brain surgery, they're on their path to healing, it's affecting their physical bodies. They might not be able to move their hands or their feet, or they're experiencing aphasia, so not being able to talk. And all of a sudden, these physical wounds then become emotional. There's anxiety, there's fear, their brains all of a sudden start planning for the worst case scenarios. What if I will be like this for the rest of my life? What does this mean for my work, for my identity? Spiritually, people then run into these big questions of, is God punishing me?
Yeah.
Did God plan this for me? Is there a God? People will even, question, their religious and spiritual beliefs because of this traumatic encounter. And often it involves all of these things all at the same time. And I know for myself, a lot of my deepest wounding happened in my teens. And it was at the hands of a spiritual leader who used their power and their privilege and their trust. And honestly, they used their religion as a way of controlling, and not just myself, but others, into doing things with my body that now, when I look back on it, I can identify as abuse. At the time, and for many, many years, I was convinced that it wasn't. That either I wanted it or that this was right. I don't think I've ever shared this, but one of those things is within the Catholic and Christian tradition, and going back, a millennia, one of the ways that some people believed one could purge themselves of sin is to physically hurt themselves. And they call it the discipline. And I mean, you may have seen this in movies where people will flog themselves because they believe that they are wrong, that they are bad, and they are trying to come close to this idea of, well, think about how much I am hurting God by sinning. And so I have to hurt myself. I mean, all of this is horribly psychologically and spiritually and physically wounding, especially for children. And I was convinced for a time that I had to do this.
That you deserved it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it took me more than a decade to realize that, no, all of that was false. And it was only serving the sickness and the wounding of another person who took advantage.
Oof. It's an awful thing to go through.
Yeah.
And so many people do. I think about friends of mine who are gay, who tried very hard to not be gay and could not make themselves enjoy any sexual experience with a member of the opposite sex. And they thought that meant that something was wrong with them, that they weren't trying hard enough, that they didn't care, they didn't love the way they were supposed to love, and that it just made them wrong and bad. And I mean, at the very heart of some concepts of Christianity is this idea that we are born sinners. We're born bad. We're just a mess to start with. I mean, if you believe that, it's incredibly hard to come to a place where you feel okay with yourself. Because
and I don't think it ever goes away, even maybe for one's entire life.
Yeah.
It becomes a spiritual practice of daily healing.
Yeah. Oh, Yeah. You know, as somebody who is a sexual assault survivor myself, this is something that I get asked because I'm very open about the fact that this happened to me, and about the fact that not only did it happen, but the person convinced me that the situation must have been consensual and that I was just not good. And people ask me, like, how do you do that? And I was like, you know what? It's a daily situation. Some days I wake up and I have to fight it, whether I like it or not. And it makes me angry. We talked about this with some of the stuff that's in the news right now. I was just like, you know, we're talking about sexual assault by people who are famous and rich and that people look up to, and it re-traumatizes. And I have to deal with those feelings again and again and again. And it's exhausting. Sometimes it's just, I get up, I get into the bathtub, I climb into bed, and I try tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes that's the best we can do. And again, a lot of times people are taught that that's not okay.
Yeah.
It's not okay to take care of yourself. Just suck it up and move on.
Or that, oh, you've been dealing with this for a year. You should be over it by now. Right? These expectations of healing.
Yeah. I had somebody ask me, how long do you think you're going to be in therapy? Aren't you like fixed yet? And I'm like, okay, step 1, I'm not broken. Step 2, this is maintenance. This is spiritual and emotional maintenance for myself. I'm going to do it every day of my life in one way or another because I deserve it. Yeah, that's an interesting way to kind of jump into mine. Is like what I grew up with thinking is that I just didn't deserve things because I just didn't fit into any mold that I was supposed to fit into. I wasn't the right type of girl. I was a sickly child with asthma that had to avoid a lot of things, and kids were worried that I'd catch it, and adults didn't believe it existed. Some of the adults in my life. I didn't fit molds, and because of that, and I had people, even when I was young, tell me that my asthma was God punishing me.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and that, you know, if I would be better.
And because you're not over it, what does that say about you?
Yeah, exactly. You know, and we hear this all the time. Because you're poor, God must hate you. Because you're this, God must hate you. Because you're that, God must hate you. It's terrible. And what ended up happening in my healing is that I just went into full-on rebellion. It was like, fuck you and everything you stand for. I put my middle fingers up to the church. I walked away. I threw myself fully into exploring myself and exploring what I want, exploring all of this other kind of stuff. And I set aside the concept that I could ever have spiritual wholeness.
Yeah.
I just thought that was something that had to be separate. And academia does a great job of teaching you that your body, your mind, and your spirit are completely separate things.
Yeah. It's a good old Cartesian split. Yeah.
Yeah. And even though I'd learned about Gestalt theory and things along those lines, the idea that we are all one thing and that the whole is bigger than the sum of the parts, I had learned about all of that, but I didn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. And to be quite honest, I never started healing any of my spiritual wounds, never started looking even into them until I had that counselor basically tell me the concept of spiritual abuse. And then that counselor also abused me. So the only time in my life that I was like actively suicidal was leaving his office when he turned his back on me, literally. And basically was like, I'm not going to help you anymore. And I thought, man, if I can't get the person that I'm paying to help me, if I'm that bad, why am I here? And it took me getting to that point to start actually healing, is to say, no, like I have a choice. I don't have to die because this person doesn't like me. And luckily I have a rebellious kid in me that will stomp her feet and get really mad about those things. And at least the anger gets me moving.
And one of the hardest parts is, you know, like your therapist or the priest in my life. Or whether it's a doctor, right, that doesn't believe that you have an illness or these symptoms.
Oh, you're a woman. You can't be in that much pain. Oh, you're a big girl. You just need to lose weight. Fuck you.
Or how it's still taught in medical school that people of color feel less pain
oh my God.
than white people. It's changing, but all of these things really cut to the chase of how hard it is to heal in our culture. And often, especially when it comes to spirituality, people run the other direction, just like you, right? We have these experiences, and I could have done this too. I really considered it, is completely rejecting spirituality altogether. Full on, like, hardcore atheist, even like nihilism, right? Like, life is meaningless. There is no God, you know, and really getting hardcore about it. where often what healing means is dealing with the wound at its core, so stopping the bleeding, going through the healing process.
Yeah.
And then there's new growth after the healing process. And what the hospital has taught me is sometimes this new growth after the initial healing can take years. And I have seen plenty of doctors say or tell people, you're never going to walk again. And 10, 15 years later, people are walking. It's because they never gave up. They fought for that healing. They fought for that ability.
Right.
I'm not saying that everything can be healed, right? I'm not saying that we're all going to just get up and walk. No, some things, because of the damage, cannot be changed. However, they can be lived with. They can be healed.
Yeah, and sometimes, even if something can be fixed, you might not find it worth the effort to fix.
Yeah.
Well, a great example, something that continues to wound a lot of people is that I'm a big person, right? I'm fat. And I know this, but I also know that I have asthma, I have hypothyroidism, I have a whole bunch of other things that make it very difficult for me to do anything in the exercise realm that would do something about that. And even when going on a 1,000-calorie-a-day diet, I didn't lose weight. So what I would have to do, literally starve myself to get thinner, is not worth it. I might be able to quote unquote heal that, but I would be a miserable human being.
Yeah. And I would say that because things like that, our cultural beliefs around, or even spiritual beliefs around what it means, say, to be fat, I consider those spiritual wounds.
Really?
And the reason is, and I mean, they're also psychological wounds, right?
Yeah.
I also believe they're spiritual wounds because shame is often the tool being used.
Oh, that's a good point.
To try to implement healing and shame. And shame is a spiritual technique.
Yeah. And I have seen people do that to people with all kinds of, like, you were talking about you'll never be able to walk again. I know somebody who was diabetic who lost both feet. Telling them, yeah, you can walk again if you spend $50,000 on this equipment and do this and do that and do all these other things. And if you're not doing all of those things, then obviously you don't care enough about yourself.
Or you're not trying hard enough.
That's damaging. That's incredibly damaging. Maybe it's okay to be like, I've been diabetic my whole life. I'm trying to take care of this thing. And it's all right if my life is going to be this way now.
Often spiritual healing will look like acceptance.
Yes.
And I think when it comes to healing sexual, spiritual wounds, acceptance eventually will be part of that process. And acceptance that the wounding happened, acceptance of the trauma, but also an acceptance of oneself.
Yeah.
As I have moved from my spiritual wounds and have been trying to reclaim my gender and identity and sexuality and all of these things, the closer I come to healing is the closer I come to accepting that these parts of me are good.
Yeah. Oh my God. I love that you bring up the concept of acceptance, because that was probably the thing that stood in my way the most. Because some of the things that happened to me when I was young and all of this other kind of stuff were stuff that, like, it was wrong. It was bad. It should never have happened. The person that did it to me was an abuser. It was not okay. And I had this concept of, if I accept it, I'm saying that it's okay.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So I was never going to do that. And what I didn't realize in that was how much harm I was doing to myself.
Yeah.
In continuing to just be like, that was wrong. That was bad. That was not okay. And just railing against it. That anger continued to damage me. And it was not until I surrendered that anger that I could actually start healing.
Yeah. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but the anger in the initial process was useful.
Yeah, it got me moving. It kept me alive.
And it was wrong. Anger is a healthy emotion if it moves, if it gives us energy to move toward what keeps us safe, what moves us toward healing. And yet I think what I'm hearing you say is that for a time you were stuck in anger.
Yeah, you can't live in anger forever.
Yeah. And that because you were stuck, that prevented healing.
Yeah, and not only that, but it also prevented growth in a lot of ways. My anger
Yeah.
pushed people away. My anger kept me from trying to make connections with people.
Mm-hmm.
My anger kept me isolated. My anger kept me unhappy. My anger at the guy who was telling me what I should be doing to be successful in business is what kept me from starting my own business for 20 years.
Yeah.
Because, fuck it, I don't want to be like him.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't realize that meant that I wasn't even trying to do it a different way.
Yeah.
I just wasn't giving it a chance.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, when it comes to healing, and especially those sexual, spiritual wounds of my past, has looked like getting closer to acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
Acceptance of the past and acceptance of what I can do right now in the present. The future is kind of nebulous. The hospital has taught me that planning is useless, but it's also essential.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's a famous quote from like a general or something in World War II. But it is. It's this idea of like it's good to plan for things. And yet it's not good for me to hold on to an expectation that those plans have to work.
No, that'll be
because often in real life they don't.
It's an exercise in futility.
Accepting myself in this moment while also being aware of, well, what will bring me joy today?
Mm-hmm.
What's going to bring me connection? What's going to bring me awe? What can I trust today?
Mm-hmm.
Who can I bring into my life? For me, these are tools or questions that I ask myself that move me closer to healing, because things like awe and joy and meaning and human connection, at least the way I define them, this is what spiritual health looks like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because it speaks to my intrinsic being and what I am believing about my life in the world right now. And especially when it comes to polyamory, coming to understand that it is okay for me to love multiple people in whatever way that looks like, that is ridiculously a spiritual awakening for me.
I mean, think about it. The acceptance part of that, I think that is so important, because not only can you accept that it is okay for you to want that and to have that and to be fulfilled in that way, but also you need to accept it when you feel some shame around it, or you feel guilty, or you feel stressed over trying to make sure that everybody is taken care of. All of those things are natural parts of it too. We've had this conversation. You know, one of the times when I came up to see you, I literally was sitting in the hotel room and I'm like, I am a married woman sitting in a hotel room waiting for a married man. You know,
and all the cultural and religious stuff that means.
that piles on top of you. And I could either fight it, right? I could be angry about it. I could fight it. I could give in to the shame, or I can accept it, sit with it, talk to myself about it, talk to my partner about it, and heal from it.
And realize that what you are doing is moving yourself closer to acceptance and love and joy, and you're creating meaning. I'm doing the same thing. And it's rejecting the boxes of belief, whether they're cultural beliefs or spiritual beliefs or religious beliefs, whatever. It's rejecting the beliefs that no longer serve us.
Yeah.
And honestly, keep us from being who we are.
So I think what I can extrapolate from everything that we've been saying about how you start healing, the first thing that you have to do is face that wound. You have to know it's there. Say, I am wounded by this situation that happened to me and never should have, or that I put myself in and didn't take myself out of soon enough, or whatever the situation is. Fully looking at it in all of its realness.
Yeah, and beginning to.
Yeah,
and then making a plan of what can I do in this moment about it. It could be talking with a friend. It could be talking with a partner. It could be listening to a podcast. It could be reading a book.
Could be doing a step 4 and then a step 5. Yep.
Yeah. It could be choosing to wake up in the morning and saying, today I'm going to find one way to love myself.
Yeah.
Whatever it looks like, as long as it is a movement toward reclaiming identity and an intrinsic identity that every human being is born with worth and dignity.
Including you.
Including you.
Yeah.
That is where it starts. And sometimes it's baby steps. It might mean getting a therapist. It might mean getting a spiritual director. I mean, there's a lot of different ways and sometimes different modalities. It might mean going on retreat.
Yeah.
It might mean joining a spiritual community, and one that holistically affirms who I am versus what I was raised with.
Yeah. It might be stepping away from a particular friend community and stepping into another one.
Yeah.
You know, it could be stepping away from a partner or putting in some distance. Or a parent.
Or a family.
Yeah. Or a child. I think that's really, really important. This is something that we absolutely frown upon in our culture, is like, if your child is problematic, sorry, you're just stuck with that for the rest of your life. Doesn't matter if they abuse you. It doesn't matter if they... And I think parents feel trapped.
Yeah.
And I think that's a spiritual
wound. And children
wound.
feel trapped.
Yeah. I think that's a spiritual wound. Those family wounds.
All of these wounds. And yet, I think one thing I love about polyamory, at least to me, is this is an identity and an ethic that says we are worthy of creating the bonds of connection that we want and that we need.
Yeah.
And that the rules around this is really rooted in consent and respect.
That's right.
Rather than having some kind of intrinsic notion of like, well, one man, one woman.
Yeah, I hear a lot of times, well, that's just what it's like to be a married person, or that's just what it's like to be this or that or the other. That's what it's like to be a boss. Well, but maybe not.
Why?
These are all social constructs, and recognizing that they are social constructs gives you the power to be able to step outside them and to build things that better serve you and better serve the other people in your life.
And we all get to decide what social constructs and contracts and what spiritual constructs and contracts are helpful and healthy and really serve me in the best and most positive ways. Which ones can I let go of? I don't have to believe in anything. I do believe for myself, I need to believe in something.
Yeah, same for me. There's a few things that I absolutely have to believe in. I have to believe that inherently people try to do good. Sometimes that's incredibly twisted, but I think people try. I believe that there is something outside of us that is more powerful than we understand. And that we're capable of understanding. I don't necessarily consider that to be a god or something that's bigger or better than me. Just there's something there when you start to look at the world in all of its wholeness that is greater than the sum of the parts. Yeah, so there are things that I believe in, and then radically, and this should not be a radical belief, but it is, especially for like anybody in any minority group at all, that I am worthy.
Yeah. That every human being is. We're born that way. And there's a lot of shit that can happen that can turn us bitter and angry and mean. And I'm a big believer that hurt people, right? Brokenness untransformed will become brokenness transmitted. I really, for myself, believe that if I don't heal my sexual, spiritual wounds, these wounds will bleed out over other people.
Yeah, they'll pass
on. And I do not want to pass these on to my children. I don't want to pass these on to my community. I don't want to pass these on to my partners.
Yeah. I think that's a beautiful way to kind of close all this out. Is just to say, stepping towards healing, stepping towards finding those wounds and starting to give them an opportunity to heal is moving towards the better treatment of everyone in your life.
Yeah. And so I hope that maybe we've given some people food for thought, maybe a beginning, maybe a confirmation. Man, they're on the right journey. Maybe I'm wrong. Who knows, right? I'm very open to, everybody's experience will be a little different, but I hope that our conversation today was helpful.
Me too. And I certainly very much enjoyed having the conversation with you.
Yeah, you too. Until next time, everyone, love on yourself. Consider a wonderful, beloved journey with bringing the people who you love on board with you and whatever connections those look like.
And walk away believing in your inherent worthiness.
We're all worthy. You just gotta, sometimes I just have to live into it once in a while.
Thank you.
All right, we'll talk to y'all later.
Bye.